Welcome to Timberline Bass Podcast, your place for Wisconsin bass fishing and everything outdoors.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Timberline Bass Podcast. Today we're gonna do one that's kind of special to me. Anybody who's seen my garage or my boat knows I am the absolute definition of a tackle junkie. I'm pretty sure my credit card company absolutely loves that fact. My wife's not a fan, and I'm pretty sure I fit in pretty good with the tackle companies. But I did kind of a deep dive. In honor of all the Japanese listeners we have, I wanted to do a special episode on JDM tackle, a little bit of the um, history of bass fishing in Japan, even to a little bit, because you can't tell the story without telling that. Um, and just my outright love of everything Japanese. I mean, my kids are obsessed with anime. We spend a lot of time watching that. You know, Japanese women. I mean, Japan in general. Uh, Something about Asian stuff is cool. Um, but so starting out, we'll kind of touch a little bit on the history. And I'm sorry, like I'm gonna have to do some deciphering with my notes here, not because they're illegible or anything. When I do my research, I'm really thorough, and it turns out when it's something I really enjoy, I get a little too thorough. So I now have to pick out the things that are relevant to normal people and not just fanboy crap that I packed on here thinking normal people care about. Um, so I mean, starting out, bass fishing in Japan is, well, I want to say different than here, and I mean we're gonna get deeper into it, but it's I would say Wisconsin more relates to the Japanese style of fishing. I mean, Japan is the land of finesse. You know, little line, little baits, very technique specific equipment. Um, there's such limited good bass fishing in Japan. Um, that the waters are highly stressed. I mean, those fish see every freaking bait you can imagine. And not saying U.S. stuff doesn't work there, because I'm sure in places it does. But in such a densely populated, tiny little island, it turns out there's a lot of people that like chasing ditch pickles. So, they had to learn to adapt and overcome. Very similar to how our lakes are getting around here. And I hate to say it, the more people that get involved with this sport, um, I do think at some point we are going to lose some of the differences. And even places down south, like I'm not saying Wisconsin is the only place with high fishing pressure, but we definitely have a closer mindset to them here. Um, Another thing too, their uh their biggest way of fishing, I guess the most accessible to people, they call, I'm gonna butcher this, okapari, which roughly translates to bank fishing. It has a way more literal translation, but it's lost somewhere in the clustered mess here that is my notes. um Sorry. Like here, a lot of people when they think of fishing, um, power fishing definitely comes to mind a lot. I mean, it's a pretty American way of doing it. I mean, you would even see the argument right now with forward facing sonar. Um, people want to stop looking at the back of heads so they can watch people's backs of their head while they're using a bigger rod and heavier line, I guess. Um, but so that is the ideal, or not ideal, the stereotypical American way of fishing. Um, one thing too, getting into this a little bit more. Japanese tackle always feels ahead of its time. And up until more recent times, I mean, it really was. The not really joke, but the thought process is that we've always been 5 years behind Japan since JDM tackle became a thing. That window is narrowing, thanks hugely in part to the internet, and the fact that we're all obsessed with it. I mean, we do look to them for what's coming next. There's literally people that scour Japanese videos just trying to catch a glimpse of something different. Um, yeah, it's definitely a thing. Um, but I would say a lot of the reason it feels that way because of the extreme pressure they have. Innovation is necessary, and you can definitely argue the same thing here, but it doesn't seem like we're focused on innovating in the US anymore. Everything is just reinventing the wheel. There's nothing new under the sun. Company A came out with something and it's getting some looks. So Company B is going to rip it off as close as they possibly can without getting any legal trouble or any sort of ramifications. And I'm not going to lie, my understanding is that is kind of how bass tackle in Japan started. I mean, there was a point in time where Japanese items that were exported here were kind of thought of the same way as we think of Chinese stuff. But I'm sure I'm not the only one. I will happily pay more for things made in Japan. The quality is typically better. The attention to detail and the fact that, like I said, innovation seems to be the key thought process behind everything means more to me and justifies my dollar a lot more than Company A repurposing Company B's crap. Um, too, and a lot of the techniques that come out of Japan that we see as new, again, not so much nowadays, but back in the day, those techniques were years, decades old. And we'll get into some of them. I mean, I'm sure most people can can name a lot of them right off the bat, but the irony in it is Japan wouldn't have bass fishing without the United States, but bass fishing in the United States, I don't think would be what it is without Japan. There is such an amazing symbiosis between the two, and it keeps driving both sides more and more. I mean, I hope to God there comes a day where U.S. tackle companies understand and realize that part of the drive for JDM tackle is it's better. Now, I have a hard time arguing it's better enough to justify some of the prices, and there is definitely a lot of price gouging and raised prices when it comes to the JDM market. I'm as much of the problem as anybody else there because I'm one of the idiots who will pay $25 for a jerkbait. Um, but eventually, hopefully, things get better. And I guess too, I shouldn't. There is price gouging that goes on to an extent with JDM tackle, but a lot of the pricing is the high demand that exceeds production, slow shipping times. We're bringing the crap across the pond. Um, and a lot of the Japanese brands are kind of a niche boutique style thing. I mean, a lot of these companies weren't super big until we started throwing money at them, which is how every business grows, don't get me wrong. But it takes time for these companies to wrap up and, you know, make production meet the demands. So the one thing we should probably touch on, throw in the acronym, I guess, or whatever around JDM. What does that stand for? Japanese Domestic Market. So basically, what that translates to in real world talk, any of your JDM stuff was not initially intended to be shipped out of Japan. It was meant to be a domestic brand there. Um, and somehow or another, whether it's people going over there and seeing stuff, them coming over here and bringing stuff, watching videos, our gluttonous asses decide we need it, and we're dumb enough to pay the money to get it here. So we take something that was domestically made there and force it here. Um, but the other thing too, a lot of these techniques, they take time to develop. I mean, these Japanese anglers, I don't care who you are, if you watch some of them, they are so meticulous and so much thought process going into designing these baits. And a lot of times, even when they make it over here, the West Coast has been pretty notorious for Americanizing, refining, and making them popular over here. We'll touch on it more later, but like the biggest one I can think of is the drop shot technique wise. That did a really good job of staying hidden out in California for the longest time. Um, I, I mean, I hate to say it, like me and my dad were probably some of the first people to start doing, and I learned it from him. I'm not, but from him fishing the ever starts, learning it from other guys that brought it over there, like. And I remember the first time we started throwing a drop shot here, and the looks on people's face, and no way, you're an idiot, you're wasting your time. I mean, we were throwing a drop shot in Wisconsin and making money on it, um, before you seen it on Bassmaster, before anybody even really knew what it was. I mean, to the point it was hard to find the weights to do it. Um, they weren't the drop shot weights we have nowadays. Um, but okay, so now this one's gonna take a little bit more. Let's get into, um, we'll call it the history of Japanese bass fishing. Largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass did not naturally do not naturally occur. Did not, because they spawn there now, but did not naturally occur anywhere other than the United States. Um, from the research I did, the first time the largemouth bass was introduced to Japan was in 1925 by a businessman, and I'm going to butcher this, named Tetsuma Akahoshi. Um, he imported 400 baby bass from California and released them into Lake Ashinoko near Tokyo to promote fishing and create a new food source for the people in that city. Initially, the interest was really low, but the species did eventually spread clearly. And unfortunately, it is now considered an invasive species in Japan. To my understanding, technically, catch and release is illegal in Japan for largemouth bass. Um, it it decimates the natural fish populations over there. I mean, just like everything else American, they're big, they're mean, and they're hungry. um, and they pretty well take over a body of water. As long as there's the food to support them, they're gonna continue to go. Um, all right. I'm sorry, I'm digging through notes here. I'm a couple seconds of silence to make up for a bunch of information you don't care about. Okay, so really, when they started spreading significantly in Japan was post World War II. Once we had American soldiers occupying Japan, it didn't take too long for U.S. soldiers to realize what was in the water. I mean, in all honesty, I know if I'm away from home like that for an extended period of time, I'm gonna do the good old boy thing, and I'm gonna find a stick, some string, and I'm gonna see what's in the water. I mean, how many of us, when we drive by a pond or a creek, you can't help but think, I wonder what's in there. Um, and oh, hold on. In the 1970s in Japan, bass fishing started significantly gaining traction and popularity. Um, I think that's probably about the time that Bassmasters was kind of making its way over there. I've heard that there were a lot of. We'll get into my some of my nerdier background. Um, I mean, it's no big secret, like or anything I'm ashamed of. I don't know why I said it that way. I play a lot of video games. I grew up in that day and age. The golden years of some of the Nintendo stuff. Some of the coolest games I play are actually old Nintendo, Super Nintendo bass fishing games that were made in Japan. And there's a lot of likenesses of very popular American bass anglers from back in those times. And some of them did go on to have their own games. I don't know, partnerships, how that all laid out. Um, and there is even a don't quote me, I should have looked into this. Who has gone on record saying what got him into bass fishing was kicking the crap out of one of the pro anglers in one of those video games, and beating them in the Bassmaster Classic was where their love started. And in all honesty, even me in the winter when I can't be on the water, it drives my wife absolutely up a wall. But I spend a lot of time playing old fishing games because they're corny, they're fun, and it keeps my competitive juices flowing, I guess. So in 1988, there was a second major introduction of Florida strained largemouth bass that occurred at Lake Ikihara. Sorry. Which is why we see so many monster largemouth coming out of Japan. They grow them big there. Um, I mean, luckily, not luckily, kind of mix. Japan holds the world record right now for the Florida strain largemouth. The Ken Duke and a group of really great biologists put in the time and the work, and it's not my story to tell. Go watch them and look into it. But they set the record straight and got things put right and got a man the record he rightfully deserved for years. Um, so like everything else Japan does, they take something American and make it better. Um, so one big thing over there, like I had mentioned, bass are treated as a invasive species, and in all reality, they are. There's a lot of ecological impacts there because they, like everything else American, made itself the top of the food chain. They began consuming all the native fish, ayu, chubs, I can't, some kind of carp. I'm not even going to try that one, which led to concerns from the government. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a punishable offense. I don't know how it works. Fine, who knows? If you get caught catching and releasing a bass, my understanding is there are restaurants on Lake Biwa that take the bass and they serve them as food. There are trash cans on the shore. Basically, how we treat carp um, is their thought process on bass over there from a governmental standpoint. Um, but they're also notorious because the bass anglers over there um, like to outlaw it a little bit and they throw them back anyways. Not condoning that, any of our listeners in Japan, I mean, but, it's a thing. Um, but despite being on the invasive alien species list, there are efforts to manage and maintain them, and they are a staple of Japan's fishing culture. I mean, especially around Lake Biwa. Um, I don't know too many anglers that wouldn't trade their left nut to go spend a few days fishing on Lake Biwa. Definitely a dream of mine. My wife's been bugging me for years to get our passports and take a vacation, and when she does finally get me to do it, unfortunately, it's either going to be to Japan fishing, Africa fishing, or Mexico fishing, because I have a problem. So now we'll fast forward a little bit more. Oh nope, I mucked up my my notes here. Sorry again, folks. So key aspects of modern Japanese bass fishing. A very popular mindset there is chasing monster fish, especially, especially around Lake Biwa. Um, because they do have enormous bass. I mean, 6 to 10 pounders are fairly common there. Fish ranging from 13 pounds to 15 pounds annually. I mean, they catch a bunch of them. So there's a huge culture there around landing trophy fish, hence the giant swim baits. Um, there's a lot of really good Japanese glide baits. There's a lot of really crazy Japanese glide baits. Some of those baits, I'm pretty sure you need a winch and aluminum cable to throw them, but they're getting results. I mean, that's it's kind of phenomenal the way they're innovating that over there. Even, um, like I know a lot of things. A lot of times when I think of Japan, I think of the highly technical, technology is insane over there. Especially when it comes to fishing and stuff. Even some of their baits are just freaking nuts. I mean, very meant to do very specific things, tweaked in really odd ways. It's neat. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the U.S. that could even remotely say they have a pulse on the Japanese soft plastics. There's so freaking many of them. I mean, tackle stores over there. Uh, I would be broke living in Japan. I mean, their tackle stores are like gas stations or like a Bucky's. I mean, they're freaking huge. They're shit packed floor to ceiling. Um, between soft plastics, hard baits, um, your terminal stuff. I mean, they're even innovative in the terminal stuff. Look at the Nico hacks and stuff. I buy a bunch of them. I mean, it makes it better. It's less. They're very good at fixing minor inconveniences and making them better to the point that it totally changes the whole dynamic. And a lot of stuff too. I mean, my rods and reels. From Wisconsin. I like St. Croix for my spinning rods. Absolutely don't. I've got one or two of their bait casters. I'm not going to say they're terrible, but I'm a big Falcon guy for my bait casters, and there is a significant difference between a Falcon bait caster and a St. Croix, and it's nothing. Not a bad thing. It's just I grew up throwing Falcons. That's what I'm used to. It's a freaking broom handle, and that's what I want. Um, but when it comes to my reels, I'm almost 100% JDM. I am a Daiwa and Shimano snob through and through. Um, I really don't care for American reels all that much. Um, I've got some. Honestly, like I even hate to say it, like a lot of times I'll buy Cast King and stuff before I'll buy any real American stuff. Because even the American stuff's coming from China anyway, so why not save a couple bucks? I know what I'm getting. I've said it before, like the Cast King stuff, it's not really beginner friendly, but if you know how to use it, like you can get the performance out of it. They're all right. But my absolute peak, I run all Tatulas. I've got some lower end Tatulas, I've got some higher end Tatulas, but they're just phenomenal. I have never broken a Daiwa reel. They, as much as I preach about maintenance, that's the one thing I'm terrible on is my reels. Um, I don't grease them the way I should. I don't oil them the way I should. They sit in the garage all winter with the drag crank down on them. Like those are all big no nos, but they just keep going. You know, um, e- even I've got a couple like lower end Daiwa spinning reels, like what are they, Fuegos or something? Um, that I would argue are better than some of my higher end American spinning reels. It just, in Shimano, you can't go wrong with Shimano. We for years, all anybody who knew what they were doing ran Cerados. I can't really speak to the new Cerados because I'm so infatuated with the Tatulas. I'm not switching over anytime soon. But I wouldn't be scared to use one. I would trust it more than I would, like I said, some of the American brands. Um. Oh, so that Okapari I talked about before, I found my more literal translation. It more literally translates to local place. So that's what they call shore fishing. And there is, granted, we have a shore fishing culture here too, and it's very cool. Um, but the culture over there is freaking insane. Um, another thing too, like they're oh yeah, that was why I had to. Okay, so basically you can break it down into two things. They're either the Okapari fishermen, which are shore fishermen, or the other one is the high tech bass boat guys. And like, I like my 19-foot boat. 21-foot glass boat is freaking amazing. But their lakes over there, and they're just the space they have. It's more practical. They're running little bass boats, like 15 to 18. I mean, I've seen some really tiny ones. But, I mean, deck to the freaking gills in electronics. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's like the peak of the craziness when it was the Wild West and the Elite Series on whatever you wanted for electronics. Like, I mean, them guys are they got some stuff. It's cool. But another really, and I hate to say strange because there are some very significant comparisons. We're like this way, but like bass fishing there is a fashion thing, and it is here too. I've made the jokes before about the sparkly boats and the dye sublimated jerseys and the matchy borderline fruity bass fishermen, like. But over there, like they've got like a hip hop style to it. Like it's a whole alternative fashion thing. And I got the kind of an example here. Not that everybody's this way, but this is kind of, look at that. It's like freaking kind of 90s, early 2000s hip hop. Granted, this is an older picture too, but like some of the stuff they wear, it's to me it's really neat. The fact that fashion is tied so heavily into it. Um, but it's like I said, it's a weird mix between streetwear, hip hop, and outdoor apparel. I know there's a U.S. brand that's going to be kind of making a splash over there because at the end of the day, they do absolutely love American stuff. So it makes sense that would. Sorry about that. My super professional Milwaukee backlighting kind of crapped out on me. I forgot to charge the battery. Um, but yeah, so I mean that's one of the cool things. The aesthetic there is very important. Um, and that's to them a big thing is bass fishing over there is it's a freaking art form. The attention to detail, and I think that's where the kinship comes from too. Um, that's how I see it. It's me versus myself versus nature, and constantly trying to solidify better ways of doing things to see the things in nature that you can capitalize on or tweak to make something fit what you're trying to do. I mean, just that. And maybe I'm weird in seeing it as me versus myself versus nature. But at the end of the day, like I'm real good at getting in my own head. There's a lot of people out there that know me that know I'm my own worst enemy. Um, but that's part of what I love. Like when I can get the hell out of my own way and pay attention to what God put in front of me and pay attention to the way things are done, like man, that's when the beauty and the magic happens. Um and I think that's kind of where at least I feel the extra kinship with Japanese anglers. I mean I feel like that's the whole mindset. Like um they're just like there is in our community here, there's a big sense of pride over there in what they do. I think I've said this before too. Like, I went so many years where like my job defined who I was. I think that's a very American thing to do. I'm Dalton Shear. I was a fabricator. Like, I'm a fabricator mechanic now. Like, but over the last few years, it's become more and more apparent to me like that. It just disgusted me. Why is how I make my living how I define myself? At the end of the day, I don't really give a shit what any of those people think of me as long as I'm getting my work done. Like, and when I think of myself, I try really hard. Like, I'm Dalton Shear. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Not always the best at either. Um, but I'm also really proud of the fact that I'm a bass angler. Like, and I put a lot of emphasis on the bass part of it. There's a lot of people around here that'll try to shame the shit out of you for it, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I enjoy catching other stuff, but getting a big green girl on the end of the line bricks a guy up. Like I don't know how else to say it. The guys who are the same way understand exactly what I mean. Um, but getting back on topic, I think a lot of too what is created the way they identify themselves and how the rest of the world identifies Japanese bass anglers um, is just having to adapt to the pressure. I mean, when you're sharing a bank with 50 or 60 other dudes, or you're on some of these little bodies of water and you're stacked gunnel to gunnel trying to fish a tournament or whatever over there, like you learn to survive in pressure, and you can't help but be proud of that. So we'll kind of go over a couple of the really popular lakes over there. I mean, probably the most thought of one is Lake Biwa. Like I said, most of us would kill to go fish over there. Um, just a beautiful place, amazing people around there. Um, my understanding Japanese culture isn't super duper fond of outsiders, but you know they treat us good, and I'm sure it's just like over here. The second they find out you're a freaking bass nut too, like there's that kinship there that even exceeds freaking language. I mean, look how many Japanese anglers come over here and can't hardly speak any English, and it don't matter. Like, I'd give one of them dudes a shirt off my back and not even know if they're saying thank you or get the hell out of here because they're into what I'm into and it's cool. Like, um, another good one is Lake Kawaguchi, which uh, is known for having like a incredibly beautiful view of Mount Fuji the whole time you're fishing. I mean, how cool would that be to jack the hook on a freaking largemouth standing under Mount Fuji? Like that's the picturesque view of Japan, you know. Another one is Lake Ashi, which is known as the birthplace of Japanese bass fishing. Sorry, I'm kind of just reading off the notes here. And there is definitely a tournament scene over there. I don't know how exactly it matches our own. I mean, clearly it's modeled after it to an extent. Um, but they've got the Basser All Star Classic that attracts thousands of people. Um, and let's be honest, Japan produces freaking hammers. Look at the guy. I mean, honestly, look at the Japanese anglers that come over here. You're going to a country how far from home. A lot of them are leaving their families behind. Some of them, it's their first time leaving Japan. I don't know the exact statistic there, but you're coming over here, driving on the wrong side of the road compared to your home place, tugging a giant frickin' boat around, tearing through these big cities. Americans in general drive like assholes. Um, Going to these great big lakes. I mean, I don't even know how many lakes over there you can get a 4 foot wave on. There's tons of them here, you know. And not only do they come here, ignore the language barrier, they come here and they kick ass. I mean, they're freaking good. Um, I hear it, which is probably the bad kind of stereotyping, but if I know an angler's Japanese, I'm probably gonna assume he might kick my teeth in. Like, but the thing is, you know, Japan didn't just copy American bass fishing. It honestly it reinvented it. It revolutionized it. It added life to a stale and stagnant freaking pool. Like it's insane. You gotta respect the ingenuity there. Their biggest thing is the precision presentations. Those baits are doing an exact thing that somebody wanted it to do. A lot of downsizing on things, which in Wisconsin, anybody who knows finesse fishing knows that that can be the biggest key in the freaking puzzle. Like, um, and when you look at JDM baits, the extreme attention to detail too. The little lines, the how closely colors match natural forage, the patterns on the baits. There's an attention to detail there, and we're seeing it a lot more in the American market with custom painting and stuff. But that's just how they do things. Um, so now we'll kind of get into that's the history of bass fishing over there a little bit on what it's like. We'll get into the actual birth of the JDM market. Um, like I said before, it was all specifically made for Japan, not originally intended for export. A lot of the well-known Japanese brands we touched on some Shimano, Daiwa, Megabass, Depths, G-Crack, Full Cast, Jackal, Lucky Craft. I mean, there's every year that list just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But from what I can tell, the first like JDM bait that made a real impact in the United States was the Lucky Craft Pointer 78. Um, Growing up as a kid, I'm gonna kind of sound like a spoiled brat here, but like that's all we threw were Lucky Crafts, and even back then, Lucky Crafts were freaking expensive because they were imported. Um, but luckily my dad's got a really good buddy he fished with that was sponsored by them, so it kind of took a little of the burden off. But like I never threw Rapala jerk baits, anything like that. We always had Lucky Crafts. And to this day, I've got a jerkbait box full of Megabass and one full of Lucky Craft, and then I've got one full of my custom ones, my ones I paint myself, whether they're really good Chinese knockoffs that I spit, shine, and paint, or some that I just sand down and give them a little touch of something special. Um, you could almost even kind of say Japan is the Silicon Valley of fishing tackle. The way that we're innovating technology here is kind of the same way they look at and treat tackle over there. Honestly believe we're just touching the tip of the iceberg on what's coming out of there. Every year, it just seems like more and more. I mean, I've said this before too. How many people, when we saw the urchin style baits, laughed and thought they were stupid? It looked like something that came out of a quarter machine at a grocery store. Um, but there's something there. Like they're good. If you know, you know. But um, and I think what gets them to that status, they have a competitive culture. The businesses are truly competitive against each other. They're competing for people's dollars. They're competing to be seen. Um, they go into everything with an engineering mindset, and there is a very significant obsession with refining everything. I mean, they're not just happy with something the way it is. They will continue to tweak it until it does exactly what they want. All right, now we're going to get into the first wave of Japanese influence on the U.S. market. Um, there was stuff starting to trickle in already in the 80s. A lot of people didn't really take a super amount of notice to it. But by the 1990s, Japanese hard baits really started sneaking into the U.S. By the mid 90s, brands like Lucky Craft really started to gain some traction. By 2004, this will be a big one for Japan. We had our first Japanese angler to win the Bassmaster Classic. Um, this is Takahiro Amore. I remember watching this on TV, and as a kid, 2004, that was a lot of years ago. Um, at that point in my life, I was already obsessed and in love with Japanese culture. Loved the video games. Loved just the cultural aspects. Big into anime. And when this guy stood up on stage hoisting that freaking trophy in the air, I just remember thinking it was the coolest thing in the world. Um, I follow professional bass fishing to an extent. I don't watch every tournament. I don't. We learned at the classic. I know everybody's name, but I don't know everybody's face. I more listen to podcasts and stuff like that. Um, but I could bump into Tak anywhere in the world, and I would know exactly who he is, and I would fanboy the shit out of him in a hurry. Um, he's amazing, and he's still doing good. I don't know exactly how old he is or anything. I don't obsess that much over the anglers, but I mean, this guy is a legend in his own right, and still doing it today. Absolutely a pioneer for Japanese anglers coming stateside. Like, it's a pretty big deal in our world. Um, Sorry, I'm not so good at the multitasking. So a little bit about Tak. Clearly won the 2004 Bassmaster Classic, which was a huge cultural shift for the JDM market. More people wanted Japanese stuff. Um, when when a Japanese guy can come over here and kick the crap out of a bunch of Americans, like how do you not take notice of that? So Takahiro Amore was born in Tokyo, Japan. but was raised in a rural area of Japan and is the most successful professional angler who's ever immigrated to America based on career winnings. So, dollar wise, he is the most accomplished um, angler. Sorry, wow. Yes, from a financial standpoint, he's won more money than anybody else that's immigrated to the U.S. In that 2004 Classic, his final round catch of 13 and a half pounds gave him a 3 day total of 39 pounds and 2 ounces and a 2 and 3/4 pound margin over the late great Aaron Martins, who had 36.6 pounds. Um, it was one of the coolest classics ever. It was kind of a buzzer beater thing. Like, it was pretty neat. Um, so at that point, what uh, what Americans started noticing, the better finishes. Some guys are coming over here, or guy at that point coming over here and kicking the crap out of guys. Um, started noticing the way they were fishing, more realistic actions. And then the big one, suspending jerk baits that actually suspended in the water column. The tuning and making sure that what the box says it actually does was kind of a big thing. Um, and fun little random fact: the American obsession over tuning jerk baits comes straight out of Japan. Um, to my knowledge, nobody really paid any attention to that until it was shown over here. Because you can take any jerk bait and tune it and kind of play, make it sink, make it float, hold it in place, lead wire, suspend dots, all sorts of stuff. But that mindset came from Japan. Which all this stuff kind of led to a technique revolution. Many here's where we're getting into the modern techniques that come from Japan. The drop shot, which we've already mentioned, is a very big one. It was created over there and refined in California. We Americanized it and turned it into the power shot. So many different ways of fishing the drop shot. Personally, like I do fish it traditionally sometimes. But my favorite thing to do with it is a freakishly long leader and throw it in grass and purposely hang the sinker up. Um, I'm sure there's other people out there that know it and do it. But I've caught a lot of fish doing it. Another one, the free rig, which is kind of gaining traction over here, and of course the Tokyo rig. Um, sorry. Yeah, so all those techniques were popular as heck in Japan before they became mainstream here. The reason for these things, again, we've touched on this already. The clear water requires finesse, requires being as natural as possible. You can't use the water to hide flaws and mistakes quite as well. And the pressure, like I said, you got to constantly be innovating when them fish are seeing thousands of baits a day. If you're not doing something different, you're not catching fish. So I mean, in all honesty, Japan solved the U.S. problem of pressured fish before American anglers even really realized it was a problem. You hear to this day a lot of times, well, our fisheries are aging out, and yes, some of them are, but a lot of it is there's so many more boats on the water nowadays than there used to be, and it disgusts me to say this, but I would say the average angler nowadays could have competed with the Bassmasters guys back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, the knowledge and how easy it is to learn. I mean, we've got YouTube, we've got podcasts, we got Bass Live. You know, if you want to learn something, you can find somebody willing to teach you. And uh, a lot of that's what I love about this sport. I mean, I've mentioned it before when I was younger, like a pursuit of knowledge really didn't mean much to me. But for whatever reason, when it comes to fishing, like I consume everything I can find. Before I throw anything new, I'll watch 20 hours in videos just paying attention. What's he doing? How is he doing it? Like, yeah, you know, so for them to granted they didn't figure it out because it was a problem here, but they had an answer to a question before we even knew what the question was. And I think that's a really important thing, and a lot of thing they deserve respect and recognition for. Um, there's some key philosophical differences between how we approach fishing and how the Japanese approach fishing. Like I've said before, a lot of things here is power fishing. We're going for reaction bites. Drop it in front of them, give them less than a second to think about it, make them commit. And that still plays. Like I would say 50% of my fishing's done that way, whether it's flipping a jig or a Texas rig, running a crankbait past somebody. I mean, there's even times you fish a jerkbait fast, and then the covering a lot of water is a big one. How often do we zoom right past fish? I know I do. You see it a lot of, fishing as a co-angler. The guy in the front of the boat power fishing, and you throw the finessey stuff, pick it apart a little bit. You can cast farther behind the boat, like, you know. So that's kind of more of the American mindset, where the Japanese approach is very much match the hatch. Get as close to the natural forage as you possibly can, and you see that in the realism in their colors and their paint schemes and just the overall attention to detail. Um, Very subtle actions. Um, one of my BFS baits that I don't like to talk about a lot because a lot of guys don't throw it. You can huck them on a spinning rod or the Megabass Karashi twitch baits. I mean, if you watch what that thing's doing in the water, you wouldn't think it's anything special, but in a tournament when you're running a bank and the fish have seen everything, like that thing freaking plays. And you can play it a little deeper. You can just run subsurface, and if you do it right, you can use it like a top water. Um, but just the subtleness of it is what makes it freaking shine. Um, so those are the big differences in philosophy between the U.S. and Japan. And there's some significant gear differences too. Uh, but I will say the U.S. is kind of catching up with it. Like the technique specific rods. I know bass fishing as long as I can remember, it's always been kind of technique specific to an extent. You had your cranking rod, your flipping rod, and stuff like that. But a lot of the Japanese stuff, they break it down even farther. They've got flimsier rods for certain actions. They'll stiffen them up a little bit. Stuff like that. I mean, you name a technique over there, and they have a rod specifically designed just for doing that one thing, which to me is amazing. I wish we would get more that way over here. I've got so many rods that you kind of have to double up on. Like my flipping rod and stuff. I use the same rod flipping as I do skipping, but it's hard to get one that does both of them absolutely perfect. I don't have the time or the money to sit here and make custom rods that do one thing exactly, and I already have way too many rods in my rod locker. But it would be neat. There are certain things that I would like to tailor a little bit more, which is something they do over there. The other key difference with their rods is they're light as hell, and they're so sensitive. I mean, even American rods, like any good rod worth its spit, has got Fuji guides on it, Fuji reel seats, and a lot of the sensitivity comes through that too. Quality components, a lot of them are Japanese. Like they spent the time to engineer and figure it out. Um, another thing here too, like big deep spools on fishing reels. Um, designed to be heavier, and they got heavy drags on them, and you know, I wish I could say heavier built gears, but a lot of them that's not the case anymore. Or a lot of your JDM stuff are. It's really strange because they are nicer built. I feel like to an extent, but a lot of shallow spools. A lot of mindset behind just finesse. Everything is designed around finesse. If you went over to Japan, I don't know how many freaking heavy flipping sticks you'd really see other than the big rods that they're throwing for some of them big glide baits and stuff. Um, but everything is finesse orientated. And the baits are all hyper realistic. Very unique actions, like the little tail twitches on the minnows and the gliding actions, the multi jointed, tons of appendages, like that do just subtle little things. Again, look at an urchin bait. What makes that special is all them fingers coming off there, the way that they can twitch but just snap right back is the beauty and what makes that effective. This little section we're kind of going to call the mega bass effect, where the tackle hype kind of came into play. Um, in the early 2000s, the 2010 baits like the Mega Bass Vision 110 came legendarily hard to find. Um, Baits like this. Anybody who is worth their snot with jerkbait fishing knows what an Edo 110 is. This is a 110 plus 1, and this also isn't a Mega Bass. Thank God for quality Chinese knockoffs. Um, but the colors, I mean, go to Howie's Tackle up in Sturgeon Bay once and go to the Mega Bass aisle. Uh, you don't comprehend the attention to color and detail until you see that many of them take up half a freaking wall. Um, they're sought after, they're good, and there's a reason for it. And they keep innovating, making them deeper diving, all sorts of stuff. But unfortunately, this is where the premium prices came into play in the hunting rare colors and direct importing. Um, I'm unfortunately just as guilty of all these things as probably a lot of you are. Um, Hence why I had to learn to paint because, there was a while there trying to find some colors of my Karashis and my Itos. They were either always sold out or you could find them through a secondhand place like eBay, but they wanted $5-10 more for it. Um, it's a big thing. Like, and unfortunately, when the U.S. companies seen that that American people would pay this much for Japanese tackle, good old capitalism kicked in and American greed, and they decided that we're dumb enough to pay more for everything. And that's why everything has gone up exponentially. Um, there is the one big downfall to the JDM market. Had it not been for that, maybe prices wouldn't be where they are today. Um, but it is what it is. I mean, we got to live with it. Another big part of the Japanese fishing culture is tackle collecting. There's a lot of people that just go to tackle store and collect baits. They don't really throw them, or they do fish, but they've got baits that'll never see water. Um, and I've got nothing bad to say about that. I've got the whole first set of Frank Scalish's signature series. Like, I am definitely a tackle collector. Um, I've got some clutches that'll probably never see water just because they're a work of art. And as stupid as it sounds, I'd rather appreciate them for what they are than feed them to a pike or a muskie. Um, and this is where a lot of the limited drops came out too with the smaller companies over there. Hype colors, resale markets. A lot of this comes from the JDM market too. It it is what it is. but thank God for it, because I don't know. I enjoy the tackle collecting. I enjoy hunting down rare baits. To me, that's almost as fun as everything else. Anything to do with bass fishing, I'm just completely ate up with. My wallet and my wife don't always care for it, but you know, at least I'm not doing heroin, I guess. So the next thing we'll kind of touch on here now is the internet era explosion, which is roughly from the 2010s till now, which is what's made the Japanese stuff more available, learning the techniques easier. All your bigger Japanese companies definitely have a presence in the States now. One of the coolest things I saw at the Classic was I know for sure Daiwa had a crew from Japan that was walking around taking pictures, really tight with the Japanese anglers. I'm sure Shimano probably had people somewhere. It was just really neat. Um, Before there was kind of a 5 year rule. It took 5 years from anything to make it across the pond from Japan. It was kind of a trickle where now it's a freaking fire hose due to social media, YouTube, online shops. I mean, it just opened the floodgates. It's like a fire hose. Everything we're getting rammed with so much JDM stuff. You don't even have time to ponder what's worth it, what's good, what's not. I guarantee there's some things that work over there that just aren't going to work here, purely for the fact of the differences of forage. But I hate to say that because again, the koiki, like, and that's the beauty of fishing. We learn something new every day. Um, so how JDM changed the U.S. market? It definitely, I will say, a godsend. Is it changed the quality standards? The days of having to buy 5 or 10 hard baits to get 2 or 3 of them that ran right are pretty well gone. Um, Granted, now that is one of the niche things with wood baits. It's still to an extent. There's always out of every group a magic one that just catches the shit out of them. But all in all, for the most part, the quality standards in baits has gone up significantly. And the nice thing is as long as Japan keeps putting out quality products, the U.S. has no choice but to improve to fit in. Um, and then another thing is the explosion of technique specific gear. One of my favorites. The BFS stuff, the tackle, the rods, the reels. I mean, that's directly Japan influenced. If you want to find out more about that, go check out my BFS episode. Um, and glide baits too. They're leading the charge in glide bait specific stuff. Not saying you can't use a flipping stick to huck them big bastards around or musky setups or whatever, but like they're building really high quality rods designed just for doing that. And the other thing, which you could argue isn't great here in Wisconsin, is it kind of made finesse a mainstay, very mainstream, which is super relevant to us in Wisconsin. We've got a lot of clear lakes, so a lot of that stuff plays. And the pressure, like I said, it gets worse and worse every year. Not that I'm not happy to see people on the water. Like, don't take my words out of context here, but it just it's changing, and hopefully it ebbs and flows at times. I miss the days being able to go out on a Tuesday and being the only guy or one of 2 or 3. Those days used to be nice. Now if I want that, I gotta wait till it's raining and terrible. um and originally, like, a lot of the Japanese baits were American knockoffs purely for the fact that they wanted our stuff, but it was such a pain and so not efficient and overly expensive to get it there. They knocked off a lot of American stuff. But it's kind of changed places now. Japan is the trendsetter, and we adopt it and we refine it. And I don't think the techniques would be what they are without without that symbiotic relationship. We're always finding new ways to do things. And the crazy thing is, American anglers, I mean, a lot of us are legitimately watching Japan to see what's coming next, to try to predict the future, see what we can get one up on. Which has been a thing a lot longer. Like I said, look at the drop shot, look at the Nico rig. Those things were around a lot longer than a lot of us have known about them. Um, kind of some present day trends and maybe some stuff that's coming next. Like present day, the dice and the urchin baits, micro creature baits. There's a lot of really cool things. I don't know exactly what it is called, who makes it. I'm sorry. I would totally give you a shout out if I knew it, but they're so hard to find. Are the combinations between like a bladed jig and a spinner bait? I mean, there's some really neat stuff coming there. And then we've got the big bait culture, glide baits, magnum swim baits. They keep making that stuff more realistic, new designs, new ways of using it, different actions. I mean, it's insane. But Japan keeps pushing both extremes. The tiny finesse, everything keeps getting smaller and smaller, and then the giant trophy baits, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. Like it's nuts. They're at both ends of the spectrum, pushing the boundaries. Um, like I said, there are so many tie-ins between Wisconsin and Japan. Like that's what I really want to bring to this. The clear natural lakes is perfect for the JDM influence. Um, smallmouth. 90% of what I throw for smallmouth is all super finesse stuff. And on what's most similar to Japan is the highly pressured largemouth lakes. I mean, we're playing right out of their rule book, and it works. Um, I mean, so at the end of the day, in Wisconsin, we're basically fishing Japanese conditions half the time. Um, so the parallels there, like I'm saying, like Wisconsin anglers should really be watching the Japanese market because they're they're kind of leading the charge and showing us what's coming. But the nice thing is, like, JDM did not replace the American market. None of the American companies went away. It forced it to evolve into what we are today, and it's going to continue to force it to evolve. And I'm willing to argue at some point the American market's going to force the Japanese market to evolve again. As long as we keep up this symbiosis, there's room for both, and it just keeps making everything better. Um, and honestly, like if you look at the top anglers in the world, the guys that are really good, they're a blend of power fishing and finesse, knowing when to use what, and and I would say that's where Wisconsin anglers really shine because we have such a healthy mix of everything. Um, yeah, and in Wisconsin, we are an insane mix of U.S. baits and techniques and Japanese stuff. So I just got a few other things here. You know, one thing I really want to say, like, as bass fishing continues to change and evolve, the future isn't American. The future isn't Japanese. Um, but it is a symbiotic relationship of both of them. Um, I just I've got such a love for the Japanese culture and the stuff. I mean, it's pretty clear. I'm a fishing nerd. I kind of a Japan nerd, I guess. I love the culture. I love the architecture. I love the people. it just the whole thing's cool. And anytime I can mix together two of my passions, it's really neat. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the closeout. I mean, if anybody's got any questions or has anything to add, reach out. Like, I love talking fishing. I'll talk it with anybody. Um, so we'll kind of move here now into the final cast. Um, totally left field, has nothing to do with any of this. Um, but I want to do a quote tonight. I've been rewatching Scrubs, one of my all time favorite shows, and I've been watching it because I couldn't remember exactly which episode the quote came up in. But it's so relevant every day, and it hits home, I guess. But the great Dr. Cox in an episode, uh, they're talking about people. One of them, Elliot, thinks that people are inherently good. And Dr. Cox's point is people are bastard covered bastards with a nougaty bastard filling. Um, and I first seen that episode years ago, and I can't help but that's always stuck in the back of my head. Anytime somebody's being a prick, my mind goes right there. So there's some word of wisdom from me to you. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for watching the Timberline Bass Podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, comment, all that normal stuff. Thank you very much for your support.